Hi friends, Candace Gillespie here from the Candace's Canvases kitchen. If you're wondering why Candace's Canvases, oh, Charlie's in the background. Sammy's right here. Hi! And one of my canvases is refinishing furniture and woodworking, and I refinished these cabinets. They were that like blonde oak color, and I cut out these fronts and I put glass in them, and outdated microwave. Still works. What are you going to do? Anyway, I'm here to show you the finished book we worked on binding. And so stick with me. What is it? Stick around to see the tutorial on how to bind this book, which is made out of 8.5 by 11 paper. I tea stained it, and Sammy's hand. He's a big boy now. I tea stained it, and but what I'm going to show you how to do is just the basic binding, how to make the I have placenta brain. That's what it is, because I had a baby, so my brain is still working on that. Anyway, how to make the cover, the spine, in the back, how to glue that all together, and then how to measure for your holes and for your pages, and then how to do the long stitch binding method, which is these, you see the stitches on the outside. So stay tuned, and you can see the tutorial right now. Bye! Okay, so what I have here is just a pack of 12 by 12 designer paper, and I'm pulling it out and opening it to use this back chipboard piece. It's just the most sturdy part of the paper. If you have a paper pack that has a front flap and a back flap, you can use that. It really doesn't matter what you use. And then I'm just taking note at what size my paper is. So I started with an 8.5 by 11 and folded in half. It's going to be 4 1/4. No, folded in half. I did the same thing. Folded in half. It's going to be 5.5 by 8.5. There you go. So I'm writing that down. 5.5 by 8.5. And then I'm just going to add, on the top and the bottom, I'm going to add 1/8 of an inch. Some people add 1/4 of an inch. It just depends. So a total, I want about 1/8 of an inch extra on the top and the bottom. So I'm going to add 1/4 of an inch, which means I have 5 3/4 by 8 3/4. And like I said, you can adjust that to your, standards. So I'm taking this chipboard, and I think it would be best to first cut your spine. I did this a little bit backward, but it doesn't matter. So I'm just cutting these chipboard pieces to match my measurements. Fortunately, I had an extra piece of this chipboard, so I'm cutting my spine out now. And my spine, I'm making it the same length, the 8.5 or 8 3/4, but I'm making it 2 inches wide. And that, you'll see a little bit later, will enable me to have 7 1/4 inch signatures in here. So a little trick to just kind of make your binding last is to back it up with some duct tape or any kind of tape that you might have. So just using the duct tape, and I'm folding it over, and this will just strengthen it a little bit, I guess. And then I'm placing each piece 1/8 of an inch apart from the other. That way it has room to fold. Another method is just double up your chipboard, and that's how wide you want to make that gap, is like twice the width of that super thin chipboard. Okay, now I'm taking the paper and I'm cutting it 2 inches longer than what I need. because when I put my covers on here, I'm going to have an inch at the top, an inch on the bottom overhang. So once that's cut, I will cut it in half. So my 12 by 12 will now be 8, 9, 10 and 3/4 by 6 inches. And then I'm going to glue that so that there's an inch overhang on the left and the right, as well as the top and the bottom. So then for the middle part, I'm going to just cut it, I think I cut it 5 by 10 and 3/4. And you'll see. So first things first, this PVA glue is the best. I have used it now on cloth book covers. I've used it on the paper book covers. I've used it to bind single pages into a book. I love it. It's my favorite glue. So there will be a link below. I just spread that all over. Now for some reason, when you go to show people how you do things, it always turns out kind of funky. So just put the glue on there whichever way makes you more comfortable. This ended up kind of messy. I totally worked through it. It's fine. But you can see here that I put the left and the right the covers on first, and then I centered the middle paper, which is just this craft cardstock. So I'm spreading the glue on where that middle portion would be, making sure to get all the way to the edges, and that will prevent it from peeling up. And here you just want to make sure you place it as centered as you can. So you have, once your book is folded like a normal book, you have as much on the front as you do on the back. Okay, so here's my chipboard. I'm going to just place it against the corner and make a line across, and that's kind of a guide for you to cut. And I would cut a little more than a little less. And it's just, you can always, cut it back a little more, but you can't ever add more. So, and now I usually glue down the tops and the bottom before I do the sides. It's just my way. You can do it any way that makes you better. You just generally have to now fold these sides over. Just make sure it's nice and tight along those edges and that you kind of push it in those creases there. I'm doing the same to the bottom. Just using a regular old paintbrush to spread my glue around. Some people use glue sticks, some people use like a double-sided tape. So now it's time for the sides, and all I do is I just fold down those little tight corners to make sure that they're tucked in there really well. It's just like a nice crisp fold on the side there. And do the same on both sides, and then your outside cover is done for the most part, unless you wanted to do more to it. And if you watch my next video, I will do a flip through of my finished album or journal once I'm done. So now we're going to just do the inside, cover the inside, and I do that with the same craft cardstock. I measured what I had there, the width of it, and I just measured the height of it, and I subtracted 1/8 of an inch. You can subtract 1/8 of an inch off both sides, or it just depends on how much you want how much of your cover to be showing. So this will give it a nice clean look behind your binding if you back this part with some paper of some sort. You can do it all the same paper. It was just too long for a single sheet of 12 by 12, and I really like the two-tone look when I do this. So I'm just deciding on whether or not I like that pattern, and I didn't. So I'm looking for a pattern that I like. I ended up with a gray sheet with the white polka dots, and I'm going to measure my book. Let's see, I measured it to be 8 3/4 by 5 3/4, so I'm probably cutting it down to 8 and, oh brother, I can't do it off the top of my head. I'm so distracted. So just basically you want on that right edge over there, you want about 1/8 of an inch to show. And here I cut it a little bit too long. Like I said, it's better to cut it a little too long than a little too short. And you can see all the way around on the top, the sides, and the bottom, I have just a border of the cover showing. And that's how I like it. You can do more of a border showing or you can do less of a border showing. It's definitely preference. I think in most books they probably have just a little bit showing. And then you glue that in there. Center it the best you can. A bone folder always helps you get bubbles out. I've heard people do like a sealant of gesso or something on the paper before they put glue so that the paper doesn't absorb the moisture of the glue and give you wrinkles. There's so many different tips. This is just definitely a general tutorial on how to bind a book using the long stitch sewing method. Okay, so now our cover is mostly done. And I'm going to show you how to make a page template. So because my pages are 8.5 by 11, I have an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock. And I'm going to measure, usually I measure about 1 inch down and 1 inch up. And then I find the center between those 2 points. So I go, okay, I'm going to go up 1 inch. And, I kind of do that on both sides. As I go in 1 inch, I go 2 inches or whatever on each on the top from the top and the bottom. Then I just put top, middle, and bottom, and I kind of measured where those are, and I wrote down those measurements. That's not totally necessary. Here is where I'm going to just dot. It measures 2 inches, and I'm just going to put a dot every 1/4 inch on the top and the bottom. Then I use my page template, always making sure there's that 1/8 of an inch on the top and the bottom, and I'm going to poke using some kind of poking tool where those holes are for my page, and the holes that I'm poking in my spine are the holes that I'm going to use for my stitching when I stitch my signatures in. So using your page template is a way that you can really ensure that your page holes line up with your binding holes on your spine. I've seen people measure, I just don't get the best results. So what I'm doing is I'm lining up the top hole and the bottom hole with the paper edge, and then I'm making sure I have the 1/8 of an inch on the top and the bottom, and then I'm poking all 3 holes along the side. It's kind of my method for making sure those holes are nice and even. Okay, now here I'm going to show you some signatures. I just have this previously tea stained 8.5 by 11 paper. I've folded it in half, and I ended up using, I think, 3 or 4 pages per signature. I've heard people do as few as 2 for a signature and as much as 16 pages per signature. So it really just depends on how thick you want your signatures. The thicker you go, the more staggered your edges are going to be, so it just depends. I've decided to add, this is definitely an optional step, I've decided to add envelopes to the centers of each of my signatures. So I'm just using my envelope punch board to make those envelopes. I made 7 envelopes because I have 7 signatures that are going to go into this specific journal. And according to the simple instructions on my envelope punch board, I'm just going to fold up this envelope. And I like to round the corners too. And then I made, like I said, I made 7 of these. So moving forward, I am just wrapping up my last envelope here and putting it into the center of my signature. So here you can see I have my stack of signatures. You don't want to mix them up. Here's my page template, and I just kind of mark on there which is the top, because if you get it backwards, sometimes your stitches don't measure up very well. And then I take a poking tool. You can use an awl or some type of poker, and I'm going to poke holes into as best I can into the center. Now you notice I haven't glued my envelopes yet. That's the way that you can get your envelopes into the center of your signatures. is, you know, bind them before you close them up. So here I am just choosing, this is just a cotton embroidery thread, and it's thick enough, it's strong enough. I never have a problem with it. It's not waxed, but I don't use great lengths at a time. I just kind of use a length that I think will fit one signature, and then if that fits, then I cut the rest of it, of my little pieces of cotton twine, to be the same length. Okay, now here's the binding. I'm going to start in the center, and I usually start with the last signature. And so you start with your middle hole, and you bring your needle through to the middle hole on your spine on the very last signature row. Pull it through, leaving about 2 inches or so, just enough you want to tie it in a knot when you're done. You move up to the top hole, you punch and you put your needle through with your string, and then you put it through the top hole of your signature. Pulling it through, making it just tight enough that you don't pull it through the center there. Okay, once that's nice and tight, I put it back through the center, back through the same center hole that it's went through the first go through. There it is, the same hole. Pull it through, and then now you put it through the bottom hole. And you can do the bottom hole. You start with the center always, but you can go to the bottom or the top hole. I just tend to like patterns, so I always go to the top, back through the middle, then down through the bottom. And here's a little trick that helps me. I tighten it up, and then I flip it over and tighten the string on the other side, the first length that we did. You just want to make it tight. You don't want to make it so tight that it tears the paper, but tight enough that the paper doesn't flop around in there when it's in there. And then what I do is I put my needle through the first stitch like this. You don't have to do it. You can tie it right away, but this kind of helps me not need the finger to kind of, put your finger here so I can tie a nice tight knot. It kind of reduces the need for that. And then you just give it a couple knots and then trim it to about 1/2 inch short. You can tuck this little tail in to under one of the stitches or not. And if you don't add envelopes, you're done here and you go on to your next signature. But here I added envelopes, so my last step is to glue my envelope shut. You don't have to glue your envelope shut. It would be cute to have a picture or some journaling right there on the back of the envelope. But in this case, I just left the envelope as a regular envelope and glued it shut. Or not totally shut, but you get the point. Just making sure it has a nice stick before I move on, and it does. And there's your first signature bound into this book. Look at you, bookbinder. Okay, so I'm going to speed it up for you one more time to show you kind of speedily. Oh, here's where I decided I had a good length, so I'm just going to go ahead and make sure I cut the rest of my strings. I keep wanting to call it strings. Okay, in through the middle, then in through the middle of my next row, pulling it to where there's just a couple inches of string as a tail. Put it through the top, back through the middle, the one where we started, and then through the bottom, making it nice and tight, putting it through the stitch, and then tying a knot, a couple knots. I think I do 2 usually, snipping it, and then if you add the envelope, you just glue it shut. And that's how you do it basically, guys. You made a book. So this is probably one of my favorite paper crafting things ever, is bookbinding. I love making books from scratch, and I love that you guys love it too. So there's so many possibilities with this. Stay tuned for my next video where I will show you the finished book, okay? Hashtag Candace's Canvases so I could see what you've created. We'll talk soon. Bye.